Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had time to grab a coffee and hopefully jump across to our Slack channel for some conversation there as well. Apologies again for some of the connectivity issues we had for session one. I hope we will not see those again for this session. Welcome to our first plenary session as we discuss the Scottish Government's MaaS programme in more detail. Just by way of a little bit of background, this programme and the fund was formally launched actually at conference last year, in June last year, when physical events were still the thing in Edinburgh, and an initial 3 projects were announced to be supported by that fund in late 2019, led respectively by HITRANS, Tactran and Dundee City Council. Now, as you'll appreciate, 2020 has not really been conducive to the rollout of MaaS projects. However, as you will hear, there has been, by no means these projects have stopped, and lots of good work has been carried out to ensure that these projects will have maximum impact when conditions allow for their full implementation. We will hear from the 3 projects this morning, but before that we'll get an update from Transport Scotland, who will discuss the programme to date and provide some important information as we look ahead to round 2 of the fund opening in the next few months. As we do look ahead to round 2 of the fund, I wanted just to draw your attention to the MaaS Scotland MaaS Investment Fund online hub. This provides a central kind of networking facility for anyone who's interested in engaging with the next phase of the programme. So it's an opportunity to network, to discuss ideas, to propose projects, etc. So please do, if you're interested in the programme, please do engage with that. You can do so through ourselves at MaaS Scotland, get in touch through the website or contact details. Okay, that's the agenda for today. There is one other important addition to this morning's session, and that is our SME showcase, which kind of is around halfway. This is an opportunity for the smaller members, if you like, within the MaaS Scotland family to raise their profile, and they will do so through a series of short 2.5-minute presentations. I would also direct your attention to the SME Showcase section of our conference webpage, which is more details on all of our participants, including contact details, if there's anything that is presented that is of particular interest to you. It is a packed session. We'll be hearing from lots of different people, so we will not be taking questions at the end of each presentation. However, we have set aside 15 minutes at the end for questions, and we encourage you all to submit questions at any stage as we can towards the end. Okay, that brings us on to our first presentation, and we have a bit of a double act from Transport Scotland to provide an update on all things related to the MaaS Investment Fund. So I'd like to welcome Laura McCaig, MaaS Delivery Manager at Transport Scotland, and Heather Cowan, Head of Strategy, Climate and Integration, to give that update. So Heather, Laura, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Ali, for the introduction and for asking us to speak at this session. I'm Heather Cowan, as you said, so I'm going to set the strategy context for MaaS in Scotland and outline some of the challenges that MaaS can help to address, touching where I can on the impact of COVID-19. I'll then hand over to Laura, who will cover what's been happening since we launched the fund first year, which you've just given an introduction to, and our plans for round 2. Apologies to those of you that attended the stakeholder workshop for the MaaS Investment Fund, as you will have heard some of this before, but I'm going to go and try to go through more quickly as I've had a yellow card from Ali on timing of the presentation already, help preserve the time for questions at the end. So as we heard from Ali and also the Cabinet Secretary's opening statements earlier, the pace and scale of the collapse in economic and social activity as a result of managing the COVID-19 crisis is unprecedented and has had a significant impact on travel demand and in particular the use of public transport. So this graph gives an indication of how demand dropped off significantly during lockdown and is starting to pick back up, but it has had a particular impact on the use of public transport. And the longer term effects of the pandemic on the transport system in Scotland are still to be fully understood, as we're still in the throes of the pandemic itself. However, what we do think is that MaaS has a role as we emerge from and recover from the impacts of the pandemic. We acknowledge that public transport systems were imperfect pre-COVID. So I think the question is, how can MaaS help support the future of public transport post-COVID? And I think Klaus and Kevin highlighted earlier some of the technical challenges and considerations that need to be part of how we address this and help MaaS support the future. So as highlighted earlier, some of the COVID impacts on our transport system have been more positive. So for example, walking and cycling levels have been much higher than 2019 levels. The unprecedented move to home working could have impact on public transport revenues in a negative way, but also have significant potential in helping reduce emissions in a positive way from commutes. However, worth noting that commutes is only a portion of overall journeys. In 2019, 4% of Scotland's workforce worked from home. A recent ONS reported that 44% of Scotland's workforce worked from home in April 2020, meaning a significant increase. And we have commissioned climate exchange research on employers' attitudes to working from home and how this may be taken forward in that climate change context. So given the scale climate change challenge, this remains central to our work as transport continues to be the biggest emitting sector in Scotland. Our legal targets remain the same following the COVID-19 pandemic to reach net zero by 2045 and to deliver targets 75% by 2030, 90% by 2040. The latest source of transport emissions is cars at 40%, the largest source, and in addition 25% of emissions were generated by a combination of light goods vehicles and heavy goods vehicles. We're focusing in our conversation today on the MaaS Investment Fund on mobility for people, but I think it's worth recognising in this context that there is a potential for a role for MaaS in freight to tackle some of those challenges around goods, some of the last mile challenges, for example. But these slides also show that single occupancy car trips have shown an underlying increasing trend. And if we saw from the earlier graph on transport demand, car travellers bounce back to near pre-COVID levels, about 90% at the moment. So there is a role in addressing underlying increasing single occupancy for car, and how can MaaS help address this? So as we transition to a green recovery and low carbon economy, we need to also ensure that this is done in a way that is fair and in accordance with just transition. Transport has a key role to play in impacting against the drivers of poverty and child poverty reduction. Transport is a significant cost of a proportion of household income, and transport also obviously plays the important role of connecting people with jobs and education. So how can MaaS help us target and address affordability? And we know that people in low income households are more likely to travel by bus, while those in higher income households are more likely to travel by car. And public transport is therefore important to those on lower incomes to allow them to access service. And yet affordability and accessibility remain one of the biggest barriers. And I've highlighted a couple of other areas of inequality that MaaS can help to address and tackle. The changing needs of young people, which is much more around less ownership models for transport. So how can MaaS support their future transport needs? But we've also got an increasing older age population with mobility needs, different from the needs of young people. So how can we help address those with transport solutions, and how can MaaS support that and meeting the needs of disabled people? Overall, MaaS can support the embedding of the sustainable travel hierarchy and the sustainable investment hierarchy as highlighted in the National Transport Strategy, prioritising active, sustainable public and shared transport over single occupancy car. And we will prioritise public and sustainable transport as these have wider benefits supporting the National Transport Strategy aims of improving health and well-being, as well as reducing emissions from cars and other forms of transport. For the sustainable investment hierarchy, I think MaaS can support reducing the need to travel unsustainably, maintaining existing assets, and then making better use of existing capacity through targeted infrastructure. And this all helps us deliver our national transport strategy aims before we then consider how we better use or enhance existing capacity. So a very quick run through there, and I didn't cover in detail the national transport strategy priorities, as Mr. Matheson spoke about them earlier, but Laura did share briefly the slides. I'll now hand on to Laura to set out the context for the MaaS Investment Fund, having set out the strategic context, which I hope MaaS will help support. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Heather. So just to follow up with that, so talking about the MaaS Investment Fund, so MaaS aligns with the Scottish Government strategies, as Heather's already discussed. We're looking at a healthier, more sustainable Scotland, in that through providing better, more comprehensive travel information, introducing different travel payment options and means to access public transport, more people can feel confident to use alternative ways to travel and encouraging them out of cars and so reducing carbon emissions. So we see that our vision that all journeys in Scotland's public transport networks can be accessed using some form of smart ticketing or payment is a brilliant way for MaaS to sort of the investment fund to deliver this concept. And that was why last year they set up the investment fund, which, as you know, is for 2 million over 3 years to test out the concept of MaaS within Scotland. So you can see there I've just stated what the aims are of the fund. Okay. So there's 3 things that all bids for the fund must cover, and that's the deliverables, government objectives and themes. So the deliverables are to ensure that there's digital technologies to improve access to journey information, integrated seamless end-to-end journeys ensuring interoperability, and using real-time data to optimise journeys and provide customer information. The government objectives I'm not going to cover too much as Heather has already talked about them, but just to say that any bids must cover these core government objectives, so making sure that modal shift, active travel and the travel hierarchy, etc. are all included in any applications. So you also needed to include a thematic area in any of the bids, and there was 3 in round 1, which were rural islands and communities, accessibility, tackling inequality and mobility, and tourism. And out of that we generated a lot of interest. It was actually 40 official notes of interest came in from round 1, which transferred to 11 bids, and as you know we made the awards to 3 parties, and you'll hear all in great detail about the good work they've been doing in a minute. Excuse me. So Ali, you totally beat me to it. I was also going to give a little bit of a plug here to the work that was done from round 1. There was lessons learned, and I hope some of you were able to input to that, but one of the key things that came out of the lessons learned was that people were looking for more opportunities to network, and that's really why the online hub was created. So again, I would just like to add my voice to getting people to join that if you haven't already done so. So on to round 2 of the fund. We have got just over £1 million available to be split across projects. We don't have a set number of projects that we're going to be funding this year. It will just depend on the quality of the bids that we receive. As I say, the objectives remain the same, but the themes have changed slightly. We're still keeping the rural islands and communities and accessibility ones, but we're adding a new one of urban environments. And this is really to cover such areas as low emission zones, smart city schemes, and also localism. So we really are looking for projects that have this as a key focus, and also looking at ways that they maybe address traffic congestion, air pollution, transport safety, etc. Throughout all of the bids, we would also encourage people to include details of how their projects can deal with COVID-19 and how we can address this new normal. I'm not going to go too much into the themes today, but just to say, as we said, there was a workshop held earlier this month where we focused completely on the themes, and I'd recommend you head to the MaaS Scotland website to see copies of the presentations there, which go into more detail than I have time to talk about today. Application process for round 2 will be the same as last year. The forms, you've got an application form, business case, project plan and financial plan. Key points that I would like to cover. So all proposals must be business focused rather than pure research and provide a MaaS solution that can be applied within the public transport realm. We anticipate the proposals will demonstrate how innovative the project is relative to the challenge we're looking to address. We also want the proposals will address a commercial strategy, including risk, and demonstrate sustainable business growth or development potential and readiness for taking to market. We also want you to be able to demonstrate evidence-based market and business research, including expected impact for the challenge areas. Also to take into consideration stakeholder engagement around planning contingency for the project environment. For example, looking for charging for electric modes, mobile connectivity, etc. We'll also need to demonstrate how you can deliver around the wider public transport integration. So, for example, travel data information, payment, etc. And you'll have to demonstrate affordability and financial management for the project and include details of your key milestones. So basically, you will need to provide a project plan, demonstrate consideration for marketing and evaluation, be accessible, inclusive and scalable in your project, and include details of your organisation's heritage and experience, and also, as I said earlier, identify benefits and risks. So turning to funding mechanisms, we propose to develop as simple as an approach to funding proposals as is possible and sufficient to encourage innovation. Where a proposal is assessed as meeting eligibility criteria of the fund, we'll fund on an accruals basis. So in other words, the funding will be released in provision of evidence of achievement of the agreed milestones that you set out in your plan. Depending upon legal status of applicants, the value of the secured match funding and an affirmative state aid position, at this time we're anticipating that we will fund between 40 to 100% of the funding routes. Any unmatched funding proposals will only be considered in relation to third sector applications, and of that, these applications will only attract a maximum contribution of £20,000. So for eligibility, to meet government partnership goals, a public-private collaboration is the preferred project approach. However, other models such as singles, joint ventures, consortiums, etc. will be considered. But to be eligible, you must undertake your project within Scotland. You must be able to deliver on Scotland's wider public transport networks, so that is traditional active travel and emerging transport options. You must also have a minimum viable product or solution ready for testing and trial. So it's not any kind of research based, it is we want to see things that are actually happening on the ground. You also have to be able to comply with Scottish legislation and be compatible with or working towards integration with existing Scottish public transport smart technology specifications. Obviously, now that we do have these round one projects in specific areas in Scotland, if that doesn't mean to say that anyone coming forward with a bid in these areas would automatically be disqualified. But what we would say, we would encourage you to speak to the round one leads to find out how your projects can work in conjunction with them so that we can test out the concept of MaaS in Scotland fully. So please get in touch if you want to speak to those people. Finally, I just want to cover the timeline for what we're doing for round two. So as I say, this is the beginning of the stakeholder events that we're having just now. We'll now go into a pre-registration period where feel free to ask us questions so you can work on your applications and get the best bid possible created. The actual fund will be launched in January next year. We are then hoping to close it at the end of February. As I say, one of the other feedbacks from round one was that people needed more time to do the applications. So we've taken that on board, and we hope that by not launching till January gives you more time to get your applications in and finalised. So once we've agreed the successful contracts, they'll be awarded in April next year, and then we would hope that round two projects will start in June 2021. So that's all from me. As I say, all the information will be going on the Transport Scotland website. There's full guidance documents available, but not on the website at the moment. I'll be getting them up in the next couple of days. But if you do have any questions, I would say please drop me a line at the MaaS Scotland, Transport Scotland email address. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks to Heather as well. I think some useful background for people and also some context to what we're about to hear in terms of the project. So we'll move on to the first of these projects, and the first of these we're going to cover is the Go High project led by HITRANS, and we're going to be treated to another double act in the form this time of Ronald Robertson, who's the director at HITRANS, and Ross Basnett at Fleet on Demand. So I will say welcome, guys, and over to you.
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks to Ali for the invitation to present today. Hopefully my slides are now about to be sharing, he says. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Ronald Robertson, I'm Partnership Director with HITRANS, and thanks to MaaS Scotland and Ali for the invitation to HITRANS and their project partners to present the Go High platform at today's conference. HITRANS were delighted to have the opportunity to lead a bid to the first round of the MaaS Investment Fund, having held a long-term aspiration to test the benefits that a single shop window approach could bring in making it easier for residents and visitors to opt for sustainable travel choices instead of travelling by car at all times. We were fortunate to find a network of partners who shared our vision, and I'm delighted that Ross Basnett, Strategic Account Director of Fleet on Demand, whose Mobilio platform will be the central resource that powers our solution, is able to join me today, particularly because I'm just a transport geek, and if you've got any tough technical questions, you really don't want to rely on my knowledge of the technology and any Q&A for that. So, okay, so today our presentation will run through some of the challenges and opportunities MaaS can address, what travel in the Highlands and Islands looks like, and why it is so much more than a journey. The focus of the Go High project and added value offered through the Stronger Combined EU project, what HITRANS set as the requirements for the platform, and how the project partners built a platform that met this challenge. And finally, we'll also look to introduce the partners who have collaborated to realise our original vision. I had the privilege of speaking at the inaugural MaaS Scotland conference in 2017, and at that time my presentation included this topical slide. Topical then because the national and local news was filled with stories of overcrowding, at capacity full and stay away messages about tourism in parts of the Highlands and Islands. The region is vast, with nearly half of Scotland's landmass, and is home to less than 10% of the population. So while it was patently untrue to describe the region as full, there was, and global pandemic aside, remains a real issue in accessing a number of popular visitor attractions, in no small part because too many people want to travel by car to these remote locations which simply do not have the infrastructure for large traffic volumes on what are often single track roads. However, a better managed approach with better integrated passenger transport and active travel at its heart offered a clear opportunity to improve the situation and ensure that visitors to the region have a better experience and remember the warm Highland welcome, not the frustration of trying to drive to and park at sites like Skara Brae, the Old Man of Storr, or the Glenfinnan Viaduct. Today, I am delighted that I can come back 3 years later and report to you what we are doing to address this challenge and extend beyond tourism to a MaaS solution that will benefit both visitors to and residents of this region, and should make it easier to match people with the alternative travel options that are and have actually always been available in the region. Travelling around the Highlands and Islands should be a pleasure, and if we can work towards more people reaching their destination sustainably, then we can enjoy the experience that is offered by the journey itself, as well as the destination. We know that is not an option to replace every journey that is made by car, but there is an alternative approach that can be made so much easier if we are to grasp the opportunity of the software available to bring together multiple modes and give the customer real choice and real flexibility. The images on this slide are just a small example of the unique backdrop that can be enjoyed travelling around the Highlands and Islands, whether it be from the deck of the hybrid ferry Hallig, a West Coast Motors coach near Inverary, the delights of cycling the Hebridean Way, hopping in a car club car in Inverness, or the internationally iconic options of the West Highland Line at Glenfinnan Viaduct, or landing on Tribore in Barra. These experiences are enriched by the variety of the mode and the ability to enjoy the experience of travelling that is denied if all journeys are spent behind the steering wheel. MaaS can join these dots and make a real travel masterpiece by making it possible for people to enjoy as much of the diversity of experience that is offered by travel across the Highlands and Islands, by informing people of the travel choices available and letting them purchase travel on as wide a range of journeys and services as possible in as easy a way as you can imagine. Turning to what we're actually looking to do and the focus of our project, the HITRANS MaaS pilot did try to adopt each of the three thematic areas that the MaaS Investment Fund sought us to reach, these being, and as Laura had already mentioned, rural and island, tourism and tackling inequality. The GoHi platform will deliver a regional multimodal journey planning system using real-time data that offers on-demand payment available to all users for all participating mobility options. The pilot will go live in March 2021 and run for 12 months. And as I know that the CABSEC and other presenters have already mentioned, our timescales were delayed by the pandemic's impact, but we were really, really pleased with the partnership and collaborative approach that we've had with Transport Scotland, which has allowed us to find an alternative timescale that will hopefully allow us to test much more of a normal transport environment for people travelling to our region, but residents of a region. The benefits of the platform will include improved awareness of travel options that stimulate modal shift to sustainable and active travel, consistent fees across multiple modes, removing the interchange cost of moving between modes, and much easier planning and booking and paying for these journeys. Our hope is that this will provide those who interact with the platform with an improved travel experience and reduce their need or desire to travel by car. In time, we hope this will contribute to an improving picture of public health, reduced congestion in urban areas, and reduced pressure on our often fragile road networks. The MaaS Investment Fund will also allow Moray Council's award-winning demand responsive transport system, Dial M for Moray, to move towards just-in-time booking. I think actually it might rival or exceed in its scale as well the Lufthansa network that was mentioned earlier as well in North Lincolnshire, certainly in terms of the geographic coverage. And this will see the ability to book journeys in real time rather than a current cutoff of 3 p.m. the day before travel. It's not taking away the opportunity for people who still need to phone in and book through the council's customer contact centre, but it will hopefully augment the options available for users of that service and hopefully increase the number of people using that already award-winning service. And having noted some of the chat that preceded our discussion in this session from Dave Holliday, who I know very well, I'm pleased to say that a complementary development that HITRANS are taking forward through support of Transport Scotland and the Interreg North Sea Region Programme Stronger Combined project is a public e-bike dock system in Inverness, which will be bookable through GoHi. The e-bike share scheme will be supplied and operated by Bewagan, who people in the Falkirk area will be familiar with from the Fourth Bike system. Bikes and dock stations are due to be shipped to Inverness in mid-October, ready to set up and launch at the end of the year. So, well, hopefully we'll have some live operation of just that element in advance of the GoHi platform going live. I can now hand over to Ross, who will take us through the platform build and where the hard work is taking place ahead of what will hopefully be a successful launch in the spring of next year.
Thanks, Ronald. Good morning, everybody. So in terms of building a MaaS platform for HITRANS, there's a number of key requirements. Given the geography of the Highlands, we know it's going to be a challenge to get residents and tourists out of their cars and into more sustainable transport modes. To address this, we've got to ensure that really we remove the barriers to MaaS adoption. So make it easy for people to plan their route, ensure that as many services that physically exist in the Highlands also digitally exist in the GoHi platform. We've got to ensure that ticketing is easy and integrated as well. To get around the region, Mobilio is going to need to fuse those big ticket travel modes of air, train, and then ferry, etc., with those first and last mile providers. So bus, bike, DRT, taxi, and car club. And for all the above, the requirement's going to be for the user to be able to plan their journey, book the modes, and receive tickets as seamlessly as possible. Also, and quite crucially really, to make the potential user base as wide as possible, we need to make the platform available to, and relevant really, to business travellers, as well as to tourists and to residents. Can we have the next slide, please, Ronald? Thanks. So based on the requirements, this is what we'll be deploying on behalf of the project team. It's an individual instance of our Mobilio platform with the colours and the branding specific to Go High. The platform's going to be available on desktop, as well as available in the Apple App Store and Google Play Store under Go High branding and with Go High specific collateral. The platform's going to include all of the travel modes shown in the previous slide, which brings ferry into the mix as a new travel mode for us. And we're currently in scoping with Northlink at the moment. Once users have downloaded the app, they'll be able to access mobility in three ways. Firstly, we have a function called Mobility Nearby. This is where the platform geolocates and the user can explore different local travel modes. And secondly, we have a multimodal smart search. And this is where the platform takes the origin and the destination of the user, makes API calls out to our operator base, and then gives combined solutions to that user. And thirdly, through On Demand. And this is where the user knows their mode preference, they know how they want to get to their location, and they just make the booking directly. And in all those cases, we'll provide the ability for the user to book and pay via card or PayPal for retail, and with the addition of on-account payments for business users. And as well as delivering the platform, a key thing that we'll be doing is providing the frontline user support, and that's via our in-house service delivery centre. And another key part, as well as the platform, is that all those services are going to be answered and branded under the Go High branding as well. Rana, can we have next slide? Thank you. So, as you can imagine, to build a comprehensive and integrated platform in such a big region as the Highlands does bring challenges. For example, we've got circa 18 bus operators that cover the HITRANS region, and they've got varying levels of technical capability. Two of the key providers there are Stagecoach and West Coast Motors, and they do provide the bulk of the coverage. But as I mentioned previously, we would need that coverage to be as complete as possible. So we offer smaller operators an option of either that full integration, or for those without API capability, we have what we call a tactical flash pass solution. Another challenge we've got is new travel modes in ferry and demand responsive transport, or DRT. So ferry particularly brings with it new ticketing options such as cabin or lounge that we didn't previously have in Mobilio. And we have to have new UI designed and built to accommodate that. We have, as a platform, got some experience of DRT from a previous pilot that we ran in Manchester. But what we're finding, particularly with this pilot, is that DRT schemes are actually very individual and very nuanced. So both with ferry and with DRT, we are going through right now deep discovery processes to make sure we understand those nuances and build the correct specification. Finally, as well, we have two operators in Shottle and Bewagan who themselves are implementing new operations within the HITRANS region. So at the same time that they're doing that, they're having to work with us to scope integration into Mobilio. So just adding layers of complexity there as well. Next slide, please, Ronald. Thank you. So as you can see, we as a project team face a number of challenges in the provision of a digital service. And to address the challenges, we're really lucky to have a project team with diverse, deep skill sets. And we've worked in a real collaborative way together. And you can see some of the partners on the slide here. So as a group, we all know where strengths and weaknesses lie. And each party takes actions that are best served by their strengths. So, for example, whilst we at Fleet On Demand have got the technical capability and the know-how to integrate local transport operators, we're heavily reliant on Reynolds and his team at HITRANS to facilitate the discussions with those operators and get the buy-in to the concept, so that those operators are then happy to come on board with us. Another good example is the in-depth market experience and the marketing support provided by our good partners Enterprise to this project. So rather than just acting as a transport operator with car rental and car club, they're actually an integral part of the delivery of this whole project. So I guess in summary, we're working hard as a group. This is not just Fleet on Demand, it's not just HITRANS, it's a real group effort. We're finalising the scope right now in time for delivery in March next year. I'm looking forward to deploying Go High alongside our partners. So that's it from me on that note. Thank you for listening. I'll hand you back to Ali. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ross, and thank Ronald. I think what we presented there just illustrates why we're so excited about the MaaS Investment Fund and what it could produce. And yes, certainly, maybe we have to just delay that excitement by 6 or 12 months or so, but it's still really interesting to see all the good work that's happening behind the scenes to make sure that when you do go live in March, that you do so with the maximum opportunity for impact, which of course is what we all want to see. So we're going to move on, a slight change of tack. We're going to move on to our SME showcase. MaaS Scotland is a network with a large number of smaller organisations. We are dominated by our SME membership, all of them doing some really excellent stuff across various different areas related to MaaS. So you're about to hear from 8 of them during our showcase just now. Please also look on our conference webpage for further information and contact details for these organisations if there's anything that you hear that strikes a chord. Presenters, you have been warned, I think, that you have 2.5 minutes. This is being timed and you'll be held strictly to your time slot. Listen out for the warning, and we'll do so. First up, we have Cenex, and I believe it will be Fergus. So, Fergus, over to you.
Thanks very much, Ali. Right, I shall start my timer and do my best to stick to what is a very short amount of time. Yeah, good morning all. My name's Fergus Worthy. I am General Manager for Cenex in Scotland. For those of you who haven't heard of us before, Cenex is a not-for-profit research and delivery organisation, basically which specialises in low carbon mobility and energy systems. We're a mission-driven organisation. Our purpose is to accelerate the transition to low carbon mobility and energy and do this in a way that's sustainable, that's affordable, and importantly is inclusive. And as a not-for-profit, we're really driven by that mission rather than by trying to make money. Bit of background, we were set up in 2005 by the Department for Transport and the Automotive Council. We were the UK Centre of Excellence for low carbon and fuel cell vehicles, and we now operate as a fully independent organisation working with businesses and the public sector to help them cut carbon emissions and reduce costs. And it's really that position that we have in the ecosystem that makes us unique. We're able to work with and, if you like, speak the language of both business and the public sector and help us really to solve the challenges of both types of organisation and perhaps help them work together a bit more smoothly. An idea of the size of the organisation, we are just about 35 people, mostly based, well, in Loughborough, now in and around Loughborough and scattered all over the East Midlands. I'm based up in Edinburgh. We have 1 person in London and a small team out in Amsterdam. Very briefly, some examples of the type of work that we do. We are involved in a lot of R&D projects where the role we play is around real-world monitoring and evaluation. So if you have a project where you need to report back to a funder, things like real-world cost performance, environmental performance, and end-user experience of low-carbon technologies or mobility services, that's something that we have a lot of experience of doing. This is, for things like car club demonstrators, and also things like vehicle-to-grid wireless charging, so that kind of infrastructure piece as well as the vehicles themselves. We run the National Charge Point Registry for OLEV, and provide technical standards to government for their charge point grant schemes, and also audit all publicly funded charge points in the UK. And I'm out of time already, so Ali, I'm going to hand back to you.
Perfect, Fergus. Bang on time. And Fergus will also be presenting as part of our policy and procurement technical session tomorrow, so you can hear a little bit more about what CNX do in that area as well. So we now move on. Our next presentation is from HIRARCHIES, and I believe it will be Graham. Graham, are you there?
Hi, Ali. It's Keith here.
Oh, it's
I'm
Keith.
standing
Apologies,
in
Keith,
for Graham, who can't make it today and sends his apologies. As I say, my name's Keith Stark. I have been working in the car sharing industry in Scotland for over 14 years, all but the last month in the traditional returns-based car club model. I'm now working with HIRARCHIES, the longest serving peer-to-peer car sharing service in the UK, established in 2016. We have over 100,000 members and 1,500 cars. These are mainly based in London, but we have recently launched in Bristol and have plans to launch in Scotland and across the UK in the coming months. Peer-to-peer car sharing enables individuals and organisations with underused cars to offer them for rent to neighbours, the surrounding communities and other organisations for periods as short as 1 hour. There's no membership fees for HIRARCHIES. All trips are covered by HIRARCHIES' special car sharing insurance, and HIRARCHIES has the most secure and technically advanced platform in the car sharing industry. This has been recognised by Toyota and other large fleet operators as a route to getting their cars to the market. And HIRARCHIES now has over 200 fleet cars registered on the platform, blurring the lines between traditional car club and peer-to-peer, meaning that HIRARCHIES is delivering the best of both worlds. If I could get slide 2, Ali, please. The versatility of the HIRARCHIES system allows us to match the mobility demands of urban and rural communities, council staff requirements, other public sector organisations and local businesses with underutilised vehicles owned by individual car owners, fleet operators, council-owned vehicles, public sector-owned vehicles and other business owners. Through the provision of hourly and daily booking, keyless access, insurance, car cleaning, car maintenance, parking and management. This results in a reduction of car ownership, mobility costs, emissions, parking pressures, and provides the owner with the revenue stream from an underutilised asset while providing a benefit to the surrounding community. There is a huge opportunity as the biggest demand for cars from the community is in the evenings and weekends, which is precisely when businesses and councils and public sector fleets are largely idle. HIRARCHIES are very interested in speaking to any group or organisation who are looking to add a car sharing service to their MaaS application. So please get in touch. That's me. Thanks, Ali.
Perfect. Thanks, Keith. Everybody's very well behaved today. Bang on time. That's excellent. Okay, we move on to our third presentation. Alexandra, you there?
Yeah.
You might be on mute.
I didn't hear you, actually.
Perfect.
I don't know if anyone heard you, but I didn't. Sorry. So, hi everyone. I'm Alexandre Pirani, and I'm in charge of the international development of Instant System. So what we do at Instant System is providing white label, tailor-made mobility as a service solutions for local authorities and public transport operators. We provide two things. The first one is the app for the passengers. It's including multimodal, intermodal, real-time and predictive journey planner, which is our journey planner with our algorithms. And the other part is the back office for the authority or the operator to manage their mobility policy. And for example, push notifications or push incentives directly in the app, as it's our customer's app in the end, not our app. So we were created in 2013, but launched our first product only in 2015 after 2 years of research and development, mainly on the algorithms. We launched our first big app in 2016 with Via Navigo that we created for Île-de-France Mobilité, who's the public authority in charge of the transport for the whole Île-de-France region, which is Paris region in France. Then we started working with other local authorities and public transport operators such as Keolis or ICPDev. And in 2019, we launched our first MaaS app called MaaS for the RATP in Paris region. And then in 2020, as you may have seen it in the news lately, we launched Move Brussels for the STIB MIBB for Brussels region. We're currently developing the platform for Marseille Metropole, which is called ICAR, where we integrate 46 different operators into one app. And we're developing the e-boutique for Lyon with Citral. We currently have a bit more than 60 customers, which means for us having more than 60 apps running, as every customer has its own app. We have more than 70 employees and 2 strategic partnerships with Keolis and RATP Dev, which are 2 of the 3 main public transport operators in France. Could we go with the other slide, please? Thank you. So we work with big cities, but a lot of small and medium-sized cities too. I would say that the biggest part of our activity is small-sized cities. And as you can see here with Annecy, Rouen, Cannes, Valence, for example, which are cities between 60 and 100 people, 100,000 people, sorry. And to give you the latest news, this Monday on the 28th, we were added to the G-Cloud framework. And we're now the first and only MaaS provider integrated into the G-Cloud framework for the UK. So you can even buy our services without going through a public tender. Thank you, Ali.
Perfect, thanks Alexandra. I'm trying to limit the amount that I say because everything that I say seems to crash this webinar. So I'm going to try and move on. So next up, we have routable AI, and I hope that Matt can hear me. Matt, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you. I'll try and make sure that I don't go over the time either. Good morning. It's nice to meet you all. My name's Matthew Kendrick, and I work for a company called Routable AI. Routable AI is an on-demand vehicle routing and management platform that partners with cities to power the future of public transit. Could we go to the second slide, please? Now, I'm sure for most operators, transport officers, and other people involved in the transport space, the products offered by DRT platforms all look fairly similar and fairly sort of non-differential. So what is it that makes Routable AI different from other DRT platforms? So the main thing that makes us different from other technology providers is that our technology and our algorithm related to the routing of shuttles and buses was developed over 5 years of research at MIT. The result of that research was demonstrated in an MIT research paper co-written by our Chief Technological Officer and co-founder Alex Waller. This paper showed that our algorithm, when applied to the data set of New York taxis, was able to slash the numbers of cars required to meet demand from 13,500 cars down to 3,300 cars. The other benefit of our technology is that the way in which our routing and preparation algorithm works is that for smaller operators who are operating maybe between 1 and 5 vehicles and who aren't able to engage in looking at all of the statistics of how they should be placing their vehicles or when they should be running, our system's able to A, predict, and B, also advise when and where you should be utilizing your vehicles. What we're hoping to do with the MaaS platform and with MaaS Scotland is to effectively fill in the gaps between the larger services of trains and planes in order to make sure that transport is as seamless as possible. So I look forward to speaking with all of you and hopefully being able to work out where our company might be able to add some value. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. We now move on to Snook. Anne, are you there?
Yes, found the unmute button. Nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me to present Snook. My name is Anne Deere, and I'm the head of strategy for Snook. We're a design agency, used to be based in Glasgow and London, but now we have about 70 people based around the country and in Europe, and I speak to you from Skye today. We work with organizations who want to create services and products that customers choose to use because these products are highly valuable to them. They're accessible and inclusive. And we help these clients design services that are sustainable, financially, operationally, and of course, environmentally. There's a huge potential for rapid innovation when we learn from one another. So our clients come from all sectors and we aim to bring these insights across sectors. We help clients understand their users and customers, and day in, day out, we engage with hundreds of people to understand not just what they want, but what they need, and how the new services and products can help achieve their goals for themselves or their families, their communities, their employers. We help clients develop end-to-end and holistic services to wrap around the product or their idea. So not just design a product, but design how customers will become more aware of it, how we can tap into their trust network, how they'll access it, how they will use it day to day, and the constraints around that, in particular around accessibility, all the way to upgrading, decommissioning, leaving, recycling, and so on. We coach our clients along the way, making sure that we're not there permanently, we're there so that they can do it themselves once we leave. So in short, we can help clients demonstrate that their ideas, their products and their services meet real customer needs. That's not even 2.5 minutes.
It wasn't, and you caught me out. You were so quick and efficient. Thank you, Anne. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we move now on to Urban Tide and Simon. Simon, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. You hear me okay, Ali? Great. So hi, everybody. I'm Simon Tricker, co-founder of Urban Tide, and our mission is to make a sustainable world with AI. So we help organizations to unlock data and to maximize the value of that data. And we've been fortunate enough over the last year, we've worked with a number of interesting organizations, including Bilbao, Eindhoven and Edinburgh, and we helped them to predict noise levels across their cities. We did this with a mix of IoT sensors and also citizens' perception of noise at different times. And these outputs enabled us to predict when noise levels were an issue in certain areas and at specific times. But COVID has changed the focus for cities, and they need to understand real-time movement and emissions across large areas. And we've been doing that with Somerset Council to help them monitor and understand real-time emissions and traffic flows across the county. We understand the impact. Understanding the impact of COVID lockdowns and post-lockdown periods has been fascinating. And we aim to help to develop more predictive models as we advance with them. We've also been lucky enough to work with Cycling Scotland over the last few years, and we provide their active travel open data platform. The goal is to bring all the active travel data from across Scotland into one place and make as much of it open as possible. And ultimately, the goal with that is to benchmark and help local authorities to improve active travel infrastructure and to encourage us to find more healthy and sustainable ways of traveling. Go to the next slide. And we do all of this, just wait for the next slide to pop up. Great, thank you. And we do all this with USmart, which is our data innovation platform. And it basically collects any data from any source. And we help organizations to share that data. And then we also use our growing AI catalog to unlock new insights and develop predictive models to help manage services at scale. We work across sectors, so we're not siloed. We have a real focus on using IoT and also to support the transition to renewable energy. And of course, in the transport space, we really want to help organizations to unlock and realize the potential of MaaS. If you're interested in finding out more about these projects or how we can help you to realize the potential of AI, please get in touch with me, Simon Tricker. You can see my details there. And many thanks for the opportunity to present today and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Many thanks, Simon. And we on to our penultimate presentation now, and it's over to Sarah at Biovan. Sarah, are you there?
I am. Thanks very much, Ali. Hi, my name is Sarah Foreman, and I'm a partnerships principal at ViaVan, a developer of transportation technology and services. And despite the American accent, I'm based in the UK and I'm focused on building our relationships across Scotland. Just to quickly introduce us, our aim at ViaVan is to help make public transport of all forms more efficient, affordable, and accessible by providing fully integrated solutions for every aspect of public mobility. Our core technology enables riders to book a seat on a bus from exactly where they are to where they want to go, and it sends a dynamically routed vehicle to manage that journey. We now apply this basic system to a huge range of use cases. We're working with communities to build on-demand bus networks, efficient and convenient non-emergency medical transportation systems, and safe, reliable home-to-school transport programs, to name a few. All of our systems are highly customizable and completely tailored to local requirements, and they can integrate seamlessly into MaaS systems that enable riders to book and plan their journeys with ease. We work in very close partnership with transport operators, councils, and local authorities. In some cases, we'll provide our technology to partners that already have their own vehicles and drivers of different forms. And in other cases, our partners look to us to provide the full end-to-end transport service, including vehicles, drivers, and customer support. Next slide, please. And then, so while it takes a second to pop up, we're really aiming to bring the best combination of our local expertise and dedicated UK team, as well as our global experience to our partnerships across the UK, where we're already starting to reshape transport in the different communities that you see on the map. For example, we recently launched a rural mobility program in Tees Valley in partnership with Stagecoach and the local combined authority that's helping to reconnect isolated communities. In Wales, we've built a nationwide DRT Flexi app, which enables passengers to use one single platform that sits above multiple operators to book their on-demand bus trips all over Wales, including in Cardiff, Newport, Pembrokeshire, and more. I'm aware that we haven't yet launched a project in Scotland, but we'd love to change that and find ways to support more communities here. If there are ways that you think we can help with any transport challenges in your community, or if you just want some more detail on anything I've said, I would really love to hear from you. Thanks.
Many thanks, Sarah. I hope you can hear me okay. I think I am now having problems again with connectivity, which is a shame. Our final presentation is from You Smart Thing, and that will be from Chris. Chris is ahead of the game. Perfect. So I'll pass you over to Chris now for that.
Hi everybody. So yeah, my name's Chris Thompson from You Smart Thing. Our platform is used by Transport for Wales, Transport for West Midlands, has been used by Transport for London, and was just recently adopted by Dumfries and Galloway Council, actually for grey fleet planning and management. However, I'm going to play you a short video which is based on our business as usual proposition, which is all about guiding people to venues and events, what we call the smart way. I would just briefly add that we're also on G-Cloud and the Spark portal as well for procurement. Let's see if this video will behave for us.
You help run a venue. It's your role to encourage repeat visits and improve visitor experience. But it can be a real headache just getting there. Roadworks, congestion, diversions, train delays, and overcrowding can all spoil the experience before people have even arrived. Your staff do their best to manage all the queries, but they don't have all the answers. Venue accessibility impacts time, money, and reputation. But what can you do to solve travel issues? There's one simple solution, easily integrated with all your visitor touchpoints. You Smart Thing guides people to venues and events the smart way. Our travel assistant software pulls in real-time information from across the transport network. Uniquely, it delivers tailored routes to venues and events, taking into account factors which impact the trip, like other events, accessible routes, venue access points, check-ins or kick-off times, and pre-show drinks. The travel assistant combines journey options with visitors' individual travel preferences, keeping you updated, making sure they arrive on time, and spread the word all the way back home. So rather than give your visitors a challenge, why not give them a door-to-door experience they'll love you for? Well done, You Smart Thing. Visit travel.usmartthing.com and guide people to your venue the smart way.
Thank you, Ali. I hope that came across okay for everybody. Please get in touch for more information or check us out on the MaaS Scotland website. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it certainly worked from my end. And thank you to all of our participants in the SME showcase. Please do follow up with any organisation that was of interest there. We timed this deliberately, of course, with the MaaS Investment Fund coming up, and we hope that maybe there'll be an opportunity to partner with somebody that you've just heard of who may just fill that gap in your project going forward. Okay, so we are now back to the project. projects, led by Tactran, another one of our regional transport partnerships. Now, this project wins the competition for most speakers in a single session, so we're going to hear from Jonathan, Steve and David over the next 15 minutes. I believe we're starting with Jonathan, who's the Senior Strategy Officer at Tactran. So if I'm correct, over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ali, and good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully Steve's got control of the slides.
There we go. I think that's quite scary, me being in charge, but there you go.
You're always in charge. Can everyone see that?
Yes, that looks good, Jonathan.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. As Ali says, I'm Jonathan Padmore from the Tayside and Central Scotland Regional Transport Partnership. Like Ranald and HITRANS, we're one of 7 RTPs, Regional Transport Partnerships, covering Scotland. I'll briefly summarise the background to the Enable project and its structure before passing over to Steve Cassidy of Fuse Mobility, who'll explain in a little more detail of what we've been up to. And with a third member of the team, David Smith, who paying attention to the chat feed, just in case you have any urgent questions during the presentation. So on slide 3, for us public sector transport planners, a key role of our work has always been about helping those who don't have access to a car or who choose not to use a car to gain access to employment, education, healthcare, and other services and opportunities. And you'll all be aware of the problems that we face in seeking to ensure access to services, included in terms of the constraints of our transport services and networks, and the impact that these have on the user's experience and behaviour. So the Enable project is all about building a model with those employment, education, healthcare, etc. providers to help people get to those services and it's also about making the most out of all the existing transport services. To solve these problems we've got, we can either, well, we want to do both. We want to introduce more transport services, but crucially, and that's what this exercise does, is about making the most of the existing transport services that we have. So this project consists of building on an existing MaaS platform, which has previously been trialled in the region. And that platform then enables the planning, booking and paying for transport services. And then it's about co-designing user interfaces with and for the specific user groups. Hopefully, this meets the needs of the specific user groups in making it easier and more attractive for them to use. And it also makes it a lot easier to target those users via the specific service providers, so we can get that information and this tool direct to the people that need it. We also wanted a data dashboard that helps the public sector ascertain unmet travel demands and provide the data to help identify and inform interventions to meet public policy objectives, be they targeted subsidies, business cases for new services such as DLT, or an altogether new service model. Additionally, we also wanted to test the impacts of rewards on encouraging the use of the tool. Final slide, well, 5th slide. To build, govern and hopefully expand the project, we have a structure which includes the councils as core public sector leads in all areas, the specific public sector service providers. Currently there's 3, but this project is able to expand to all service providers really, and the delivery partners which cover the 3 main work streams of the platform, that being platform and interface build, monitoring and evaluation of the pilot, and communications and marketing to the users. So hopefully that gives you a feel for the basic structure of the background to the programme and the basic structure of the programme. And Steve will take you through the details of it in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. Yeah, so I will say a little bit more about the platform before saying, you know, exactly what we've been up to for the last few months. This diagram shows, you know, at the centre the Fuse Mobility Service Minimum Viable Product Platform. This was designed and delivered Navigogo, for example, and other services whilst we're at ESP. It's microservice based, and it does the things that you would expect. It's a journey planner, and it can in different ways enable booking and paying. And central to that as well is this user profiles that can provide very personalized information and a personalized experience as well. And as well as the data insights, which I'll talk a bit more. Looking down, the platform also has an API gateway, so it can integrate with different services and transport services. We'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. And it also includes walking routes as well to encourage walking and can integrate with cycling services. And then looking up, there's an API gateway to provide a range of different touch points. To make sense of all that messy data and information that comes together, and then provide a personalized experience via the most appropriate touch point. We've talked about briefly, and I'll say a bit more about the different services, NHS, Tayside, Loch Lomond, Dundee and Angus, but yeah, there are other services that could use this, and it might be that they want an app, it might be that they want a website, they might want a print facility, so there's a whole range of different touch points that they need. And finally, just looking to the right hand side, that admin gateway is essential as well. It's essential to the model. I'll talk right at the end about the model and business model, so that you can get information and see how you perform in both at the service level, so that top level, so how was Dundee and Angus the service working, but also at the platform level as well, and that's very important for the Regional Transport Authority. More on that later. So we just got started, and we had a decision to make about, obviously with COVID, we've been going probably about a month and a half, something like that at that point. And you know, there was a bit of conflicting view, I think, in the sector as we all sat at home about what to do. You know, some people were thinking, oh God, if MaaS was here, we could actually do something about this. And others were saying, oh goodness, it's a real opportunity to design MaaS properly. After much discussion, which I won't go into, and talking to users actually on another project that we were doing in Aberdeen, you know, it came down to the fact that, as it has been for the last 30 years that I've been involved in transport, it's about trust and confidence. It's about connecting with people. And so we cracked on. And we thought, we will not wait. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Is there going to be a different normal? Let's just crack on. So that's what we did. So the activities today, I'll just go through what we've been up to. The first thing we did, seeding the platform, making sure that platform could work, seeding it with pricing data, making sure that all that thing at the bottom of that diagram that I first introduced, we could integrate information multimodally and provide multimodal information to support then booking and payment. And importantly as well on the platform, we've very much been scoping the customer journey. So we're understanding in a technical sense what can actually be done, and it's that real sort of booking and payment art of the possible, really. There are a lot of different service providers out there. There are a lot of very small service providers, and if you look on the right hand side, you know, we work with partners to be able to deliver all of rail. We've been talking to car clubs in the region. We've integrated with Nextbike in the past, and now there's the Forth Valley Bike scheme. We bring in travel line data, and there are specific sort of outliers that we've had to bring in travel information from in the bus industry. But then in taxi and dial-a-ride, there's a huge range of different services. And so it's been putting together, understanding what customer journeys would work technically, but understanding what would work organisationally as well. And we're integrating some community transport organisations as well. Some levels of integration will just be a telephone number, because that's how it works. But you will be in a certain area presented with information which says that would work for you because you are over 60 and you have got a concessionary pass. But some will be more technical integration. So we've been looking at that technical integration, what we could actually do. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been spending time co-tailoring services. So we do have a minimum viable product in terms of the platform, but also some of the services we implemented before as a team. And this co-tailoring is that it's not full code design, but it's been able to present our front ends and understand our back end and how that can work for different people. We've used mixed methods to understand what people want, what the pains are, what the gains are. We talked to people, to stakeholders, we did surveys, we've used secondary data, we've used Mural a lot to connect with people, and the Loch Lomond co-design was a good example, really. We did co-design workshops via Mural with the youth committee. We talked to stakeholders like boots and burkas. We've talked to and worked with and done a survey with great help of Loch Lomond with Kenny, a survey of volunteer rangers, and they understand some of the travel issues. So we've been able to bring information together. So that can be done, and that's one of our learnings, I think. Just to say about the services, so what came out, I could talk forever about what came out, but I won't because I've got less time than that. What I would say is that 3 services have got very different aims. NHS, they've got a one-stop shop at Perth Royal Infirmary for urology. They want ease of access to that. We talk to people, we understand now about the age groups that use those services, but also that last 400 meters from the bus stop or the car park to the actual clinic, which is very, very difficult. And so we can do something about that. With Loch Lomond, it's about sustainable, inclusive access, understanding where the gaps are. There's a journey plan there. Which is quite a difficult journey by public transport. There's gaps at times of day at certain places. Where are those gaps? There is a lot of confusion about how you use waterbus, for example, and during COVID, what are the hot spots that really are attracting too many people? Dundee and Angus is all about inclusive access and transport not being a barrier. What we found out there was that people are having to change buses a lot. There's overcrowding, there's real worries about COVID. So what did we do? We've done a number of things. We have taken those learnings, and for the stage 1 of the project, we have pulled together, we've designed and actually developed integrated, personalised, multimodal journey planning for all of these services, and then we go on to booking and payment. So we're ready to launch on the NHS Tay side. It's a web app that was most appropriate. Very easy to use web app with a gentle nudge. There are, in this over 60s group, there are a lot of people who drive, and it's a gentle nudge to use public transport and a gentle bit of personalisation. We're looking at including web links within the letter for the appointment. So that's ready to go as soon as they're ready to go with the NHS. It's their service. Loch Lomond, we've done the web app there. That's ready to launch. Toilets were a big thing. Toilets were included in journey maps. There's other features in there, but that's done and ready to launch. Dundee and Angus, there's a native app that's been designed and developed for the college. That's ready to go as soon as the college wants to launch that. It's very strong on how to travel and COVID etiquette. So that's what we've been doing with regard to that. What next and what happens next? So starting from September, we go into a phase now up to sort of by the end of December of adding to the platform and indeed the service. So we'll launch these current touch points when the services are ready, when it fits with their plans. In terms of what they're trying to achieve corporately and the changing sort of environments, but they've got another tool in their armory now to manage some issues that are emerging. We're working on the data dashboard and really bringing out the data that's needed and necessary. The Loch Lomond app will be developed, including all DRT in the area. We've had some really good discussions with integration via Trapeze, and a widget, so a widget which can be available on the website to be able to take people into journey planning. And then CT Taxi, another DRT for the booking and payment as well, will come in. Finally, the Dundee and Angus web app and widget, again, because it's different tools and flexibility at that service level is needed. So that all happens by Christmas, building on the existing services. And this was always the plan to start to build out in terms of booking and payment. Rewards, we've done some early work on rewards, and we're looking at the different supply models that exist. And then it's about learning and monitoring evaluations. Ansons, it was interesting, the discussions that were mentioned in terms of approval ratings and benchmarking. Ansons are working on that. Launching with Sister in terms of helping activation. And then it's about upscaling and getting people to use and feedback on the service up to the end of the project. Finally, on that upscaling, because this is really key, I think, and it's really key in just in terms of a takeaway about what we're talking about. The model, this collaborative model, it's key to the project. Yeah, we've got a project. We've got a platform, which is a public sector platform, which happens to be Fuse, with 3 services on top. We've got governance around that. We've got an advisory board, and we've got the actual services as well that govern this project. Now that's important for us for the future as well in terms of upscaling. So the upscaling view is that that platform now is available, as Jonathan mentioned, for other colleges, other attractions and health services to adopt the platform and rapidly be able to develop their own services. And we can do that on top of that platform. But it's also available for, you know, Kinloch Rannoch community to be able to, if there's a particular need where a MaaS or part of a MaaS service can support the real needs in those communities, that can happen. So it's there ready to be launched with some basic design work. So that's very important. What's also important is the business case around this model. So when we've looked at the business case, and we've done a lot of work in this, built on a lot of the knowledge from Navigogo, for example, and the other services, there's got to be a case at the service level to do this. And if financially it has to work, and it can also, so on the financial level, but also in terms of savings and the corporate aims and getting bang for your buck and other things. But each of those different services will have different requirements and needs and imperatives. Now, does it work at that level? Also, does it work at the platform level? Again, the revenues and the costs, the corporate aims, you know, the things that Jonathan's got in his intro, which is quite a big intro. You know, can he achieve those things? But key at that level as well, at the platform level, is that you've got something now which is a magnet for action to do something, and to do something relatively quickly with that upscaling to achieve the objectives both at the service level but also at the platform level. And that's really important. An interesting aspect of this is when we look at the financial flows, when we've done that work, there is money left over. There is money from within the governance that can exist now, not for a project, but for a full model, to be able to use that surplus to reinvest in those gaps and those services, those gaps that exist, and maybe expand DRT. And that's the beauty of that model. And I think the beauty of that model as well is that it's a public sector asset. Public sector is the honest broker. It's a public sector that can enable innovation with the platform, and the public sector can't lose out. I mean, we read these industry reports of all the money that's available. The public sector cannot lose out, and they need to reinvest in achieving all the objectives from the very first presentation from Mr. Matheson. And that's why we're called Enable, and that's where we're going. And so we're looking very much forward to keeping in touch with people. There's the website, which has just been launched. And actually, it's interesting, 3 years ago today, which Ranald mentioned, my phone now pops up and shows me pictures from exactly what I was doing. And 3 years ago today, we were in our first ever meeting with our users of Navigogo in a cafe in Dundee. We all had pizza, and it's been a great journey. So thanks very much to MaaS Scotland and a lot of other people who will probably be in this call. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that. I really like this project just because I think it's a great example of that focus on, you know, user kind of specific design and linking, as Steve mentioned, transport to health, to tourism, and to education. This is something we've often spoken about in MaaS circles before, and it's great to see that actually being enacted now. Okay, we're now on to our final presentation for today, which is from Fraser Crichton, Corporate Fleet Operations Manager at Dundee City Council. Now, I believe Fraser has also suffered from the technical gremlins this morning. So am I right in saying, Fraser, that you will be presenting without slides? Is that correct?
Yes. Unfortunately, my computer has decided to die a death. I'm on my phone, on my smartphone, so unfortunately I've not been able to move over my presentation. So I'm afraid it's either looking at this slide or looking at my face for 15 minutes. So I do apologise for that.
No problem, Fraser.
Okay. Yes. So. As I say, apologise for the lack of presentation. However, what I'd like to just go over in the next 15 minutes is I'll introduce the overview of Dundee City Council's project. I'd like to obviously, and we've obviously been hearing it all day, add some context to the issues that the COVID issues, the problems that everybody's aware of, and then kind of finish with some positive developments that have happened even with all this going on. So the overview of the project is that anyone who knows Dundee knows that there's so many different e-mobility projects, there's so many different projects looking at transportation, movement of people, etc. And this project is specifically targeted at major events that are happening in Dundee, were meant to happen, are going to happen in Dundee, and looking at developing an app, as we've been hearing all morning, in order so users can, when they know they're coming to an event in Dundee, they can be given choices of smart choices of how they would travel to get to Dundee. Once they're in Dundee, how they would move around Dundee. And then the second phase of the project is developed to a major event that's going to happen in 2022 now. So to underpin all that, we did the first event that we had, luckily, was before the lockdown. It was 3 weeks before the lockdown, and to test, we needed to test. The theory that we had originally was that most people's mode of transport certainly wasn't with what we saw earlier, was the hierarchy of how you would transportation, how you'd like people to move about in your city. So we did a test poll of a conference that was held up at the Michelin site. It was a renewables conference. Over 300 people attended, and it was the baseline project basically came out and told us that 97% of the people travelled to that event using their own combustible vehicle. They travelled on their own up to the event. Something in the region of 2% used public transport to get all the way there. So the starting off point is not great, but that's the reason for this project. So we had down for events for 2021, we had, maybe a lot of people know, we had the Radio 1 big one that was coming. We had the Pussycat Doll, sorry, showing my age. It's Lesser Gardens. We have a major EV and Hydrogen Week conference in Dundee, and all those events were to be targeted to then provide this app for people to then to make the decisions and how to get to that event, those events. We staying on the sort of the events, obviously, and moving on to what I said before, which is the COVID situation. Obviously, those events have been cancelled, as they have across the country and the world, and that has caused major issues with this project. However, we're very confident that we will get out of this, and certainly the major conference, which was around COP in November, it'll be now November next year, will hopefully still go ahead. And we've had to revise quite a few of those looking at those events, but we obviously have a Fresher Week coming into universities in Dundee 2021. We have it was announced that the Social Security of Scotland headquarters will be in the waterfront. There's a large amount of people who will be travelling to that and work, and it's sort of identifying how they are moving about the city, etc. And then, as I say, developing the app so people can use that. So to understand where we are with that is gone out to tender. We also have a delivery organisation that's has been out to tender as well, and that will be announced in the next 2 to 3 weeks, both those things in conjunction. So obviously that will be a major milestone in this project. And everything, hopefully, Scotland government are okay with that. We're really shunting everything further into the future due to the situation. But one really key thing that we've got going for us, and what's been happening since the lockdown restrictions have been eased a little bit, is the development around the offering of what we are going to offer going forward for users getting to the events and the app. So tomorrow, for example, we've got the launch of the first intercity EV coach service called Ember. It's going to run between Dundee and Edinburgh. There's 2 coaches. They're 100% electric. It'll be the first one in the UK. That'll get launched tomorrow. 25% of all the taxis in Dundee are pure electric. That's increasing by about 2% every month at the moment. We've got car clubs that have been put in place by enterprise. They're more and more the electric ones. We've got significant amount of electric bike stations being installed in the city that have been over the last 2-3 weeks, and we've got other car clubs and other companies moving in and putting their products in. So basically providing the infrastructure, the building blocks for creating transportation and movement in an e-mobility, smart mobility way to get to these events. So in the background, if I was honest with you, I felt that we were going to have the app and we would have the delivery management company in place, and then this would be developing. But the positive thing, if there can be one out of the COVID situation, is we've got all these other elements that will cement this going forward. I would say, obviously, one of the key things that we've got is we've got a end point of the project, which was to be the open in 2021 at St Andrews. Obviously a huge event, over 250,000 people over 4 days, going into one small venue. A majority of hotels in Dundee are all catering for that. We have international guests. How do we move them to that event and back? Given everything that I've said, is the end of this whole project, and obviously that's now been moved to 2022. However, it gives us something to focus with. It then brings in other partners, other North Fife, then comes into the whole project. You heard earlier on all the partners. We have got a significant amount of partners already involved with the other 21 different projects that I'm involved in that actually will complement this whole project. Really quite exciting when you get into it. There is more detail to this, and I apologise for not having slides, but I'm sure over the coming months that certainly I'll be able to give you more detail exactly. I heard about business cases. One of the things in Dundee that I really stress, as you can hear, a little bit different than maybe other people. This is my city. I am passionate about what happens in my city, my children going forward. I do not like doing projects where I do not see an end product, where I do not see where the benefits of the project were in the first place. Now, that benefits could be in data, and then you can get information. But for me, what do we achieve at the end of it? There has to be some sort of legacy in doing all these projects. And as you can hear, I will not rest until this project produces something extremely positive, not just for Dundee, but for the rest of Scotland. So I'll finally say, sorry for the lack of slides, and I'm just praying my computer will get fixed pretty soon. But as I say, you can contact me anytime, just individually if you wish. And over this project, I'm sure we'll speak more. And I'm more than happy. Really good presentations that I just listened to from the SME that I'm very interested in. And I'm more than welcome to speak to any of those people that were on. And that's about through me. But as I say, I'm really looking forward to achieving this project over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Fraser. It's a really, really exciting project, and I think everybody would agree with me that hopefully the types of events that your project will be looking to support will be start again sooner rather than later. I just want to congratulate you, because I think it's the first time I've ever heard the Pussycat Dolls mentioned in relation to MaaS. So I think that's a first, and a good first as well. So excellent stuff. Right. So thanks to you again, Fraser. We're going to move now on to the Q&A. We have had some questions coming through, which is great, and we will touch on those, but there's still time to input your questions for any of our speakers into the Q&A platform. But I'm going to begin with one which came from Kate at ITS Leeds, and it's a really good question that I think probably spans most of our projects and indeed most conversations about MaaS. I'm going to direct it firstly at Transport Scotland, although I may come to HITRANS for comment on this as well. But it's around, when we focus on MaaS, how do we make sure that underneath that we have the right mix of transport services, especially out with our urban areas? And Kate's point is that this would seem to be more important than the digital technology side. So I wonder if, Heather, if I could come to you for first response to that.
Sorry, Ali, can you just repeat for me the main bits of the question?
It was the question that Kate had put through the Q&A.
Oh,
we have the
yes.
right transport modes underlying the digital services.
And I think this comes back to the comment at the start of my presentation, which is, we do recognise that the transport system's imperfect currently. So MaaS is going to help provide a service, but we still need this, a one-point service on top of that. But we still need the underlying public transport services to be there and be integrated in a way that people use them. So I was agreeing with the challenging Kate's questions when I came back to it. So I think in the context of the National Transport Strategy and delivering our sustainable travel hierarchy, we do still need that focus on active public and sustainable transport and how that supports our urban, interurban or rural transport. So not a complete answer to the question, Ali, as you might imagine, because acknowledging the challenge in Kate's question.
Yeah, to be fair, it's not an easy question to answer, of course. And Steve, I can see you with your hand up, and I'll maybe just come to you in just a second. I just want to ask the guys at HITRANS, and so Ross and Ranald, HITRANS obviously has a large rural area. So I was kind of intrigued as to how you guys kind of struck that balance. And Ross, more particularly, given your experiences in Greater Manchester, which obviously has a very different transport provision to the Highland region, in your experience, how did you approach that? What did you have to do differently to approach that?
I think the key thing, and I think as I mentioned in my slides, is the engagement with the operators. So it's about understanding what is available in a specific area, and then having the right engagement with those operators so that they want to actually come on board into the MaaS solution. And Ranald can probably bear this out in terms of the amount of work that's gone in, particularly from his side, where we are having to engage with multiple local operators, and it's far more of a challenge in the HITRANS region than it ever was in Manchester, where everything was far more centralised. But there is a lot of work going on right now to engage with those operators and to bring them on board. My hope and my view is that longer term MaaS will actually help to start to fill those gaps, really, because we'll have a better view of where people want to travel, how they want to travel, gained through the MaaS platforms. So I'm kind of hoping that there's a virtuous circle once we get the volume of users onto MaaS that will help to identify where there may be gaps in transport provision that we can help to plug.
Okay. Steve, you were keen to chip in on this one as well.
Yeah, just very quickly, and that volume of users, I completely agree. That's the key. Two quick ones. One is how do we get? One answer would be about you've got to be very flexible on integration. As I said, we're talking to CT operators, to small car schemes, and we've got to have a very flexible way of bringing them on board. And as I said, just leaving a telephone number is fine at times. If that's how they work, it's their modus operandi, but don't exclude them. The other thing I think, which is the bigger thing of Kate's point, if there's no blooming public transport or shared transport available in an area, you've got nothing to join up. And to us, I think there's two aspects to that. One is find out where the gaps are. That's very much a drive from Kenny at Loch Lomond to understand from the data dashboard where gaps are and what unfulfilled journeys are there. And secondly, it's that model. So the money can't go out of the public sector. It's got to be still available to reinvest, to plug those gaps. And so the model by which mobility as a service is implemented is essential to answering that question. And actually, it's a super opportunity.
Ali, can I just make a quick comment as well? It's Ranald.
Of course.
Yeah, just to say that Kate's absolutely right, and I really, I think her question really will resonate for those of us on the transport planning side of the equation as well. And to actually, Kate is leading ITS Lead's role in our project, where she will be shaping the evaluation and the monitoring of our project. So that will hopefully give some really good insight and learning into what works. But I think Heather's point is absolutely correct, that public transport was not perfect prior to the pandemic. We have been seeing years of decline. We also do have quite limited services in a number of areas. So, we are looking to augment some of the transport services, or add value, or add their ability to be better represented, I think, through our platform. And I think that's where the DRT booking services come into their own as well, as part of something that we can look to do, and we can look to build on what we're doing in our project. But it was very much part of what drove our decision to try and come up with a region-wide approach. But that brings with it the challenge of trying to get as many of the mobility providers involved as possible. What software as a service is doing is making it much easier to access services that have operated for a long time. I can go back in my own professional experience over 25 years and remember trying to sell integrated ticketing products that would allow you to travel by coach from Inverness to Ullapool, by ferry from Ullapool to Stornoway, and do a grand tour of Lewis, as it was called, and that was the ticket's name, all in a one-stop shop. But you had to be either in a CalMac office or at least picking up a CalMac paper brochure at that point to be able to do that. But actually, it became a seamless journey once you had achieved that, and that is in quite rural parts of our region as well. So I think we should look to augment. I think there is a real issue around revenue funding for passenger transport services in rural areas, and I think we do need to pivot and be agile about how these services look, because coming out of the pandemic, some of the deep-seated issues that were in place already may well be exaggerated and exacerbated, and we do need to be open to that. And I do think, as a rural transport practitioner, we do need to recognise how we need to fund those. But there are also some really good initiatives looking at some of the urban opportunities around the Bus Partnership Fund, where if we can actually make buses competitive with a private car in time terms, that you can make them more attractive. I appreciate I've strayed from Kate's initial point, but it's just to say that there are things you can do to make bus more competitive in both rural and urban areas, or at least be there when you need it. But actually, I think DRT could be an important part of that as well, that development solution.
Thanks, Ranald. No, that's great. Steve, I'm going to come back to you, because the next question is directed probably at yourself, or maybe Jonathan, from Julie. What is the long-term vision around governance of the Tactran platform?
That's a good question, Julie. I was actually trying to answer it, and in the platform, and I'm so daft that I've been having to message David to give me instructions. So I'm pleased that I can answer. Yeah, I don't think, and Jonathan will have something to say about this, I'm sure. There is no definitive model that has been agreed yet. I've talked about the flows and how it could work, and we've got a business case around that, which is part of our submission. The two things that are very, very important is, one is if the platform is providing services with some technology, and they're accessing that service, there needs to be agreements and arrangements between those two bodies and the digital partner, which is us. Second thing is there's got to be a methodology for onboarding and agreeing the inclusion of the new services, all those little balloons that I drew, the extra services that come on, and everyone has to agree with that. And thirdly, and most importantly, and I think this points towards the direction that it will probably go, is, and it goes back to that point again about what happens to, in the theoretical model of there being more money there being surplus available, profit in inverted commas, that has to be used to achieve the objectives of that organisation, and which is about improving access. So I don't know if Jonathan wants to say anything else about that. I'm sorry I couldn't answer online, I did try.
Yeah, if I can. And you probably tell that I'll be coming at this from a social inclusiveness, reducing inequalities angle. But as the slide showed, I suppose there's three elements. There's the councils, Transport Scotland and ourselves, there's the public sector services, the other public sector services, and the providers as well. So there's those three core elements. But, and I suppose the point I want to make is that the regional transport partnerships, the local councils, particularly through the community planning partnerships, it's through the community planning partnerships we are working very closely with the further education bodies, the health boards, the employment services, etc., etc. And it is through that process that we identify where the priorities in any area are, and also through that process that we're able to build extremely strong relationships with any of those bodies to address their needs. So on one hand, that's why there's the core of the councils, which is really centered around those community planning partnership processes, as well as the service, as well as the tech providers as well. And then we can bring on board any of the services that are priorities in the area. And then between us, between the councils, the RTP, Transport Scotland, as well as those other public sector services, such as the NHS and the Department for Work and Pensions, and the local colleges and the local universities, etc. That provides the structure by which we continue to grow the opportunities in the area. And I suppose actually, can I make one more final point? When you're in those community planning processes and you're hearing about the problems from the colleges and you're hearing about the problems from the Department for Work and Pension, you're hearing about the problems from NHS Tayside, and you realise that they're all putting some kind of subsidy in, by actually being able to create this platform where we have individual accounts, then we can make better use of those individual public sector subsidies that are going out via the health boards, the colleges, etc. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. I just wanted to just briefly expand on that. This might go back to yourself, Steve, because you mentioned, you used the phrase trusted broker in your presentation, which is one that we use often and a model that we like. But without putting you on the spot, do you see that longer term at a regional level, or should this be an...
Well, you went quiet on me there. Do I see it being on the regional level?
I was just thinking from the trusted broker point. Yeah. So the trusted broker point of view, you would be thinking of that from a regional or a national level.
That's good question. Thanks for that. I mean, I think we need to prove it. We've got work packages to prove this within the project, and we've got the model based on data that we had from our work that we did beforehand. At the moment, we've modelled that on a city level and a regional level. But there is a role. I often, being very honest, when this kind of question comes up, I look at the national entitlement card and the model that they've put out in terms of, they've got some basic, well, not basic, quite a complex back office, but then local authorities can do their own things and then can add extra applications and services on top of that. And so it's a bit of both. So I think we're always in danger of saying it's one or the other, and I think there'll be different models that can incorporate, as long as everyone's objectives, all the things that have been talked about from the great projects. If objectives can be achieved, what is the governance and the management around it? I think the question about governance is just key from Julie. So I don't know the answer, but we will hopefully prove it in inverted commas, and there'll be things that work and things that don't work at a regional level, and let's learn, which is what the programme's about, mutual learning.
Yeah, apologies for putting you on the spot there, Steve.
No, it's good. Great question. No, it's the question.
I completely agree that that's where we are, particularly in Scotland. We are building the evidence base that will support some of these larger questions, which need to be kind of discussed in parallel to what we're doing in the projects that we've talked about today, and of course the round 2 projects that we're all excited about coming up.
And it'll be great to, I mean, within MaaS Scotland and maybe other fora, to be able to really get into the guts of some of those questions, because they're absolutely essential.
Perfect. So we are kind of running out of time a little bit, so we will take a couple of very quick questions. So this one is directed at yourself, Fraser, if you're there, from Wesley, and he's asking if you guys are looking to control your own e-scooter infrastructure for when this is added to your trials, or are you asking the operators to be responsible?
Right. So this is kind of around the questions and answers that have been happening in the last 5-10 minutes. I can only talk from obviously a Dundee city sort of perspective, and one of the key elements that we found in all the projects that I've been talking about is that it's probably the word control, is that the council, and the word again is, I'll use it again, as being an honest broker, and for us, we try to have control over all these different elements, especially in transportation, because then you can make the bigger decisions, which is movement of travel, how you want your city to look, low emission zones, etc., etc. So if you're asking me the question, what would be the utopia going forward, it would be for us to control it. It might be that ultimately the management and of it is Dundee City Council, and then a private industry run them on their behalf as a subcontractor or something like that. But the overall governance and all this that we're trying to do is to keep control with the council.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. And just one final question from Martin, which I guess could go to any of you, but we'll maybe see if anyone has any specific input to this. And Martin's asking about how patterns of car journeys are being captured. And he says, if MaaS is making access to public transport journeys easier, is it effective at growing public transport demand, or should much better understanding of car journeys be an objective to inform where public transport, DRT, etc. Could be viable? So I guess that's a question. We do need to understand the car. We need to understand that mode as part of the MaaS mix, and our certainly if the project's been led by Tactran and HITRANS, is that something that you guys are actively looking at? Maybe come to you first, Steve, and then briefly from Ranald.
David, do you want to say that?
I think it's a very important point in terms of we certainly can't ignore the car, and it's whether it be private or even with the car clubs as well, which are included as part of the Tactran project. It's a key part, particularly around about when we look at the services that we're focusing on here in terms of NHS Tayside and the national park. Is car travel is a primary mode to those services, and by developing a service and a system that is also valuable to the car user, we can start to introduce some alternatives that they may not have even considered or thought about. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do, but a very important thing to do is to make it valuable enough that a car traveller will also find value in it. So for example, with us, it's including where possible parking charges and cost per mile of cars, so they can at least understand or appreciate that it's not just jump in, turn the keys and it's all free. There are other considerations, and certainly there are other alternatives which you should at least consider and be able to access quickly, because you can plan, we can pay for them in the same place.
So I'll quickly answer to that one as well. For anyone who knows me, obviously a lot of years in EV development. We have, over the last 4 or 5 years, been systematically putting infrastructure into our individual car parks, into the individual areas, because we see being a urban area with a huge rural area surrounding us, we don't see the utopia of no cars ever being in existence. There's always going to be a percentage coming into the city, but what we can do is we can manage where we want those vehicles to go, and through parking charges, through EV charging infrastructure going forward, we can dictate where that is to a degree. And I think that's key, modelling your city and making them a separate sector, because obviously what you're trying to achieve here is lots of people in those vehicles, car clubs, etc. But not to, as was stressed there, not to ignore the fact that the car will still be a mode of transport. But how do we make sure that those mode of transports are going within a city region where you want it to go? You know, I think that's something that maybe not all cities and regions have thought about, but certainly it's one that we are adopting, and I think that's the correct way to go forward.
Just for the HITRANS project, I would say, I think, you know, Martin makes an excellent point. I think transport is a derived demand, and we absolutely need to, more than just understand the trips that cars are making, we need to get underneath that as well to understand what the drivers of those trips are. We need to understand, you know, do a better job of planning healthcare appointments around alternatives to people taking the car as well. So I think that's an area that we can do more about. But absolutely, I think we do need to have a baseline of data. There are good moves towards more openness around data, but we do need to look to capture as clear a picture of the data as possible. In the Highlands and Islands, we have areas of, you know, against national average higher car ownership, despite against national averages having lower incomes as well. So clearly that is a product of there not being alternatives to car use and car ownership. So if we are to move past that and serve our residents better, we do need to have the data in place that then absolutely, I think the MaaS platform can help shape the future of our transport networks as we start to get a better handle of what users are looking for. And I think it'll be useful in that sense. But I think separate from that, organisations such as HITRANS or Tactran or Dundee City Council and need to work with others like Transport Scotland to get a better handle of that. We've had some really good data gathered through Bluetooth surveys in the past as well, or Bluetooth tests. But absolutely, we need to understand the journeys that people are making and understand what journeys that we can then model differently. We've seen really, really positive increases in active travel, particularly around walking as well, and maybe making walking part of more journeys as well, rather than whether that's a walk to a bus stop or you know, an alternative service is something that we can do, and we can certainly incentivize and push through the work that we're doing on MaaS. And certainly it is something that we'll be thinking more of as we look to the future of our project and the platform that GoHi will provide for us to work from.
Okay, thanks, Ranald, and thank you to all of our speakers today and our participants in the SME showcase as well. And thank you for your questions from home as well. I think we managed to get through most, not all, as is always the case, but please, as I say, continue that conversation on Slack if you can. So that brings an end to this session. I hope that that's whetted your appetite in terms of what is happening in Scotland and what is to come. When we spoke last year at the conference, I think we felt like 2020 was going to be a big year for MaaS development in Scotland. And you know, for reasons out with our control, that may have been delayed slightly, but I hope we've showed you that there is still lots of good stuff going on, and we are well prepared to make 2021 really a very exciting year through the existing projects, through new projects, and through some of the collaborations that will hopefully ensue over the coming weeks and months.